This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Owen Clayton in York, England. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 1, Section 1. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos, or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Silia's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God. I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Ionian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest, thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like, satst brooding on the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert the eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first what cause moved our grandparents in that happy state, favoured of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator, and transgress his will. For one restraint, lords of the world besides. Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? The infernal serpent, he it was, whose guile stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. What time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid, aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equalled the Most High if he opposed, and with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven, and battle proud with vain attempt. Him the almighty power hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion, down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire, who durst defy the omnipotent to arms. 9 times the space that measures day and night to mortal men, he with his horrid crew lay vanquished, rolling in the fiery gulf, confounded though immortal. But his doom reserved him to more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Round he throws his baleful eyes, that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. At once, as far as angels ken, he views the dismal situation waste and wild, a dungeon horrible, on all sides round as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell. Hope never comes that comes to all, but torture without end still urges, and a fiery deluge, fed with the ever-burning sulphur unconsumed. Such place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious. Here their prison ordained in utter darkness, and their portion set as far removed from God and light of heaven as from the centre thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell! There the companions of his fall, o'erwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire, he soon discerns, and weltering by his side, one next himself in power, and next in crime, long after known in Palestine, and named Beelzebub, to whom the arch-enemy, and thence in heaven called Satan, with bold words breaking the horrid silence, thus began.
If thou beest he, but oh, how fallen, how changed from him who in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads though bright. If he, whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope and hazard in the glorious enterprise, joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin. Into what pit thou seest from what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. And till then, who knew the force of those dire arms? Yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change, though changed in outward lustre, that fixed mind and high disdain, from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contention brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that durst dislike his reign, and me preferring, his utmost power with adverse power opposed, in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. The unconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, and courage never to submit or yield, and what is else not to be overcome, that glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me, to bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and defy his power who from the terror of this arm so late doubted his empire. That were low indeed, that were an ignominy and shame beneath this downfall, since by fate the strength of gods and this ephemeral substance cannot fail, since through experience of this great event, in arms not worse, in foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs, and in the excess of joy, sole reigning, holds the tyranny of heaven.
So spake the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud, but racked with deep despair, and him thus answered soon his bold compare.
O Prince, O Chief of many throned powers, that led the embattled seraphim toward the thy conduct, and in dreadful deeds fearless, endangered heaven's perpetual king, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength or chance or fate. Too well I see and rue the dire event, that with sad overthrow and foul defeat hath lost us heaven, and all this mighty host in horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigor soon returns, though all our glory extinct, and happy state here swallowed up in endless misery. But what of he, our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have o'erpowered such force as ours, have left us this our spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls by right of war? Whate'er his business be, here in the heart of hell to work in fire, or do his errands in the gloomy deep? What can it then avail, though yet we feel strength undiminished, or eternal being to undergo eternal punishment?
Whereto with speedy words the arch-fiend replied,
Fallen cherub, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering. But of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labor must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see, angry Victor hath recalled his ministers of vengeance and pursuit back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail shot after us in storm, o'erblown hath laid the fiery surge, that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps hath spent his shafts, and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not slip the occasion, whether scorn or satiate fury yielded from our foe. Seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the seat of desolation, void of light, save what the glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Thither let us tend from off the tossing of these fiery waves, there rest, if any rest can harbour there, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss how repair, how overcome this dire calamity, what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not, what resolution from despair.
Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, with head uplift above the wave, and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides prone on the floor, extended long and large, lay floating many a rood, in bulk as huge as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian or earthborn, that warred on Jove, Bryaros or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held, or that sea beast, Leviathan, which god of all his works created hugest that swim the ocean stream, him haply slumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night-founded skiff, deeming some island oft, as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea and wished morn delays. So stretched out huge in length the arch-fiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor ever thence had risen or heaved his head, but that the will and high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with reiterated crimes he might heap on himself damnation while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace and mercy, shown on man by him seduced, but on himself treble confusion, wrath and vengeance poured. Forthwith upright he rears from off the pool his mighty stature. On each hand the flames driven backwards slope their pointing spires, and rolled in billows, leave in the midst a horrid veil. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lights, if it were land that ever burned with solid, as the lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in hue as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Etna, whose combustible and fueled entrails, thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aid the winds, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke, such resting round the sole of unblessed feet. Him followed his next mate, both glorying to have scaped the Stygian flood as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power.
Is this the region? This the soil? The clime?
Said then the lost archangel.
This the seat that we must change for heaven? This mournful gloom for that celestial light? Be it so, since he who now is sovereign can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best, whom reason hath equalled, force hath made supreme above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail horrors, hail infernal world, and thou profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call them not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more with rallied arms to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell.
So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered.
Leader of those armies bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled, if once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worse extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie grovelling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, as we, erewhile, astounded and amazed, no wonder, fallen such a pernicious height.
He scarce had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large and round, behind him cast. The broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb through optic glass the Tuscan artist views at evening from the top of Fezol, or in Voldano, to descry new lands, rivers or mountains in her spotty globe. His spear, to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills, to be the mast of some great admiral, were but a wand he walked with to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure, but the torrid climb smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. Nathless he so endured, till on the beach of that inflamed sea he stood and called his legions, angel forms, who lay in transit, thick as autumnal leaves that strow the brooks in Vallombrosa, where the Etrurian shades high overarched embower, or scattered sedge afloat, when with fierce winds Orion armed hath vexed the Red Sea coast, whose waves o'erthrew Berceus and his Memphian chivalry, while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the safe shore their floating carcasses and broken chariot wheels, so thick bestrewn, abject and lost lay these, covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud that all the hollow deep of hell resounded.
Princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost. If such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have ye chosen this place, after the toil of battle, to repose your wearied virtue, for the ease you find to slumber here, as in the vales of heaven? Or in this abject posture had ye sworn to adore the conqueror, who now holds cherub and seraph rolling in the flood with scattered arms and ensigns, till anon his swift pursuers from heaven's gates discern the advantage, and descending, tread us down, thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf. Awake, arise, or be forever fallen.
End of Book 1, Section 1, recorded December the 12th by Owen Clayton in York, England.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by J.A. Carter on January 20th, 2007. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 1, Part 2. They heard and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, as when men wont to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves ere well awake. Nor did they not perceive the evil plight in which they were, or the fierce pains not feel. Yet to their general's voice they soon obeyed innumerable, as when the potent rod of Amram's son in Egypt's evil day waved round the coast, up-called a pitchy cloud of locusts warping on the eastern wind, that o'er the realm of impious Pharaoh hung, like night, and darkened all the land of Nile. So numberless were those bad angels seen, hovering on wing under the cope of hell, twixt upper, nether, and surrounding fires, till, as a signal given, the uplifted spear of their great sultan waving to direct their course, in even balance down they light on the firm brimstone, and fill all the plain. A multitude, like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins, to pass Rhine or the Danau, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south, and spread beneath Gibraltar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith, from every squadron and each band, the heads and leaders thither hast, where stood their great commander, godlike shapes and forms, excelling human, princely dignities and powers that erst in heaven sat on thrones, though of their names in heavenly records now be no memorial, blotted out and raced by their rebellion from the books of life. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve got them new names, till wandering o'er the earth, through God's high sufferance for the trial of man, by falsities and lies the greatest part of mankind they corrupted to forsake God their Creator, and the invisible glory of Him that made them, to transform oft to the image of a brute, adorned with gay religions full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Then were they known to men by various names, and various idols through the heathen world. Say, Muse, their names then known, who first, who last, roused from the slumber on that fiery couch at their great emperor's call, as next in worth, came singly when he stood on the bare strand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. The chief were those who from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, durst fix their seats long after next the seat of God, their altars by his altar, gods adored among the nations round, and durst abide Jehovah thundering out of Sion, throned between the cherubim. Yea, often placed within his sanctuary itself their shrines abominations, and with cursed things his holy rites and solemn feasts profaned, and with their darkness durst affront his light. First Molech, horrid king besmeared with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud their children's cries unheard, that passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her watery plain, in Argob and in Basan to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud, to build his temple right against the temple of God, on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom, Tophet thence, and black Gehenna called, the type of hell. Next, Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Aroer to Nebo and the wild of southmost Abiram, in Heshbon and Horonim, Seon's realm, beyond the flowery dale of Sibmah clad with vines, and Eluel to the asphaltic pool. Peor, his other name, when he enticed Israel and Sittim on their march from Nile, to do him wanton rites which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged even to that hill of scandal, by the grove of Molech, homicide, lust hard by hate, till good Josiah drove them thence to hell. With these came they who from the bordering flood of old Euphrates to the brook that parts Egypt from Syrian ground had general names of Baalim and Ashtaroth, those male, these feminine, for spirits when they please can either sex assume or both. So soft and uncompounded is their essence pure, nor tied or manacled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbrous flesh, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute their airy purposes, and works of love or enmity fulfill. For those the race of Israel oft forsook their living strength, and unfrequented left his righteous altar, bowing lowly down to bestial gods, for which their heads as low bowed down in battle, sunk before the spear of despicable foes. With these in truth came Ashtoreth, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, queen of heaven, with crescent horns, to whose bright image nightly by the moon Sidonian virgins paid their vows and songs, in Sion also not unsung, where stood her temple on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king, whose heart, though large, beguiled by fair idolatresses, fell to evils foul. Thammuz came next behind, whose annual wound in Lebanon allured the Syrian damsels to lament his fate in amorous ditties all a summer's day, while smooth Adonis from his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood of Thammuz yearly wounded. The love tale infected Sion's daughters with like heat, whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw, when by the vision led his eyes surveyed the dark idolatries of alienated Judah. Next came one who mourned in earnest when the captive ark maimed his brute image, head and hands lopped off in his own temple on the Gunsel edge, where he fell flat and shamed his worshippers. Dagon his name, sea monster, upward man and downward fish, yet had his temple high reared in Azotus, dreaded through the coast of Palestine, in Gath and Ascalon and Acaron and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus on the fertile banks of Abana and Pharphar, lucid streams. He also against the house of God was bold. A leper once he lost, and gained a king, Ahaz, his sottish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace for one of Syrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offerings and adore the gods whom he had vanquished. After these appeared a crew who under names of old renown, Osiris, Isis, Horus, and their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries abused fanatic Egypt and her priests, to seek their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms rather than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection when they borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and in Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox, Jehovah, who in one night when he passed from Egypt marching, equaled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleating gods. Belial came last, when whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love vice for itself. To him no temple stood, or altar smoked, yet who more oft than he in temples and at altars, when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God. In courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, where the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers, and injury and outrage. And when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial, flown with insolence and wine. Witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when hospitable Dorez yielded their matrons to prevent worse rape. These were the prime in order and in might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned. The Ionian gods of Javan's issue held gods, yet confessed later than heaven and earth their boasted parents. Titan, heaven's firstborn, with his enormous brood, and birthright seized by younger Saturn, he from mightier Jove, his own and Rhea's son, like measure found. So Jove, usurping, reigned, these first in Crete, and Ida known. Thence on the snowy top of cold Olympus ruled the middle air, their highest heaven. Or on the Delphian cliff, or in Dodona, and through all the bounds of Doric land. Or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and o'er the Celtic roamed the utmost isles. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such wherein appeared obscure some glimpses of joy, to have found their chief not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast like doubtful hue. But he, his wonted pride soon recollecting, with high words that bore semblance of worth, not substance, gently raised their fainted courage and dispelled their fears. Then straight commands that at the warlike sound of trumpets loud and clarions be upreared his mighty standard. That proud honor claimed Azazel as his right, a cherub tall, who forthwith from the glittering staff unfurled the imperial ensign, which full high advanced shone like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and golden luster rich emblazed, seraphic arms and trophies. All the while sonorous metal blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host upsent a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frightened the reign of chaos and old night. All in a moment through the gloom were seen 10,000 banners rise into the air with orient colors waving. With them rose a forest huge of spears, and thronging helms appeared, and serried shields in thick array of depth immeasurable. Anon they move in perfect phalanx to the Dorian mood of flutes and soft recorders, such as raised to height of noble temper heroes old, arming to battle, and instead of rage, deliberate valor breathe, firm and unmoved with dread of death, to flight or foul retreat, nor wanting power to mitigate and swage with solemn touches troubled thoughts, and chase anguish and doubt, and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. Thus they, breathing united force with fixed thought, moved on in silence to soft pipes that charmed their painful steps o'er the burnt soil. And now advanced in view they stand, a horrid front of dreadful length and dazzling arms, in guise of warriors old with ordered spear and shield, awaiting what command their mighty chief had to impose. He through the armed files darts his experienced eye, and soon traverse the whole battalion views, their order due, their visages and stature as of gods, their number last he sums. And now his heart distends with pride, and hardening in his strength glories. For never since created man met such embodied force, as named with these could merit more than that small infantry warred on by cranes. Though all the giant brood of Phlegra with the heroic race rejoined, that fought at Thebes and Ilium on each side mixed with auxiliar gods. And what resounds in fable or romance of Uther's son, begirt with British and Armoric knights, and all who since, baptized or infidel, jousted in Aspermont or Montalban, Damasco or Morocco or Trebizond, or whom Biserta went from Afric shore when Charlemagne with all his peerage fell by Fontarabia. Thus far these beyond compare of mortal prowess, yet observe their dread commander. He above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had yet not lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured, as when the sun, new risen, looks through the horizontal misty air, shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon in dim eclipse disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations, and the fear of change perplexes monarchs. Darkened so, yet shone above them all the archangel, but his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat on his faded cheek, but under brows of dauntless courage and considerate pride, waiting revenge. Cruel his eye, but cast signs of remorse and passion to behold the fellows of his crime, the followers rather, for other once beheld in bliss. Condemned for ever now to have their lot in pain, millions of spirits, for his fault emerked, on heaven, and from eternal splendors flung for his revolt, yet faithful how they stood, their glory withered. As when heaven's fire hath scathed the forest oaks or mountain pines, with singed top their stately growth, though bare, stands on the blasted heath. He now prepared to speak, whereat their doubled ranks they bend from wing to wing, and half enclosed him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, and thrice, in spite of scorn, tears such as angels weep burst forth. At last, words interwove with sighs found out their way. O myriads of immortal spirits, O powers matchless, but with the Almighty, and that strife was not inglorious, though the event was dire, as this place testifies, and this dire change hateful to utter. But what power of mind, foreseeing or presaging, from the depth of knowledge past or present, could have feared how such united force of gods, how such as stood like these, could ever know repulse? For who can yet believe, though after loss, that all these puissant legions, whose exile hath emptied heaven, shall fail to reascend, self-raised, and repossess their native seat? For me, be witness all the host of heaven, if counsels different or dangers shunned by me have lost our hopes. But he who reigns monarch in heaven, till then as one secure, sat on his throne, upheld by old repute, consent, or custom, and his regal state put forth at full, but still his strength concealed, which tempted our attempt, and wrought our fall. Henceforth his might we know, and know our own, so as not either to provoke or dread new war provoke. Our better part remains to work in close design, by fraud or guile, what force effected not, that he no less at length from us may find, who overcomes by force, hath overcome but half his foe. Space may produce new worlds, whereof so rife there went a fame in heaven that he ere long intended to create, and therein plant a generation whom his choice regard should favor equal to the sons of heaven. Thither, if but to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption, thither or elsewhere. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness covered. But these thoughts full counsel must mature. Peace is despaired, for who can think submission? War then, war, open or understood, must be resolved. He spake, and to confirm his words out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance toward the vault of heaven. There stood a hill not far, whose grisly top belched fire and rowling smoke. The rest entire shone with glossy skirt, undoubted sign that in his wound was hid metallic ore, the work of sulphur. Thither winged with speed a numerous brigade hastened, as when bands of pioneers with spade and pickaxe, armed, forerun the royal camp to trench a field or cast a rampart. Mammon led them on, Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven, for even in heaven his looks and thoughts were always downward bent, admiring more the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden gold, than aught divine or holy else enjoyed in beatific vision. By him first, men also, and by his suggestion taught, ransacked the centre, and with impious hands rifled the bowels of their mother earth for treasures better hid. Soon had his crew opened into the hill a spacious wound, and digged out ribs of gold. Let none admire that riches grow in hell, that soil may best deserve the prettiest babe. And here let those who boast in mortal things, and wondering tell of Babel and the works of Memphian kings, learn how their greatest monuments of fame and strength and art are easily outdone by spirits reprobate, and in an hour, what in an age with their incessant toil, and hands innumerable, scarce performed. Nigh on the plain in many cells prepared, that underneath had veins of liquid fire, sluiced from the lake, a second multitude with wondrous art founded the massy ore, severed each kind, and scummed the bouillon dross. A third as soon had formed within the ground a various mould, and from the boiling cells by strange conveyance filled each hollow nook, as in an organ from one blast of wind, to many a row of pipes the sound-board breathes. Anon, out of the earth a fabric huge rose like an exhalation, with the sound of dulcet symphonies and voices sweet, built like a temple, where pilasters round were set, and Doric pillars overlaid with golden architrave. Nor did there want cornice or frieze, with bossy sculptures graven. The roof was fretted gold. Not Babylon, nor great Al-Cairo, such magnificence equaled in all their glories, to enshrine Belus or Serapis their gods, or seat their kings, when Egypt with Assyria strove in wealth and luxury. The ascending pile stood fixed, her stately height, and straight the doors opening their brazen folds discover wide within her ample spaces, or the smooth and level pavement. From the arched roof, pedant by subtle magic, many a row of starry lamps and blazing cressets fed with naphtha and asphaltus yielded light as from a sky. The hasty multitude admiring entered, and the work some praised, and some the architect. His hand was known in heaven by many a towered structure high, where sceptred angels held their residence and sat as princes, whom the supreme king exalted to such power and gave to rule, each in his hierarchy, the orders bright. Nor was his name unheard or unadored in ancient Greece, and in Ausonian land men called him Mulciber, and how he fell from heaven they fabled, thrown by angry Jove, sheer o'er the crystal battlements. From morn to noon he fell, from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day, and with the setting sun dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean isle. Thus they relate, erring, for he with this rebellious rout fell long before, nor aught availed him now to have built in heaven high towers, nor did he escape by all his engines, but was headlong sent with his industrious crew to build in hell. Meanwhile the winged heralds, by command of sovereign power, with awful ceremony, and trumpets sound throughout the host proclaim, a solemn council forthwith to be held at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every band and squared regiment by place or choice the worthiest. They anon with hundreds and with thousands trooping came attended. All access was thronged, the gates and porches wide, but chief the spacious hall, though like a covered field where champions bold won't ride in arm, and in the Soldan's chair defied the best of Panim chivalry to mortal combat or career with lance, thick swarmed, both on the ground and in the air, brushed with the hiss of rustling wings. As bees in springtime, when the sun with Taurus rides, pour forth their populous youth about the hive in clusters, they among fresh dews and flowers fly to and fro, or on the smooth plank, the suburb of their straw-built citadel, new rubbed with balm, expatiate and confer their state affairs. So thick the airy crowd swarmed and were straitened, till the signal given, behold a wonder. They but now who seemed in bigness to surpass earth's giant sons, now less than smallest dwarfs, in narrow room throng numberless, like that Pygmean race beyond the Indian mountain, or fairy elves whose midnight revels by a forest side or fountain some belated peasant sees, or dreams he sees, while overhead the moon sits arbitress, and nearer to the earth wheels her pale course. They on their mirth and dance intent with jocund music charm his ear, at once with joy and fear his heart rebounds. Thus incorporeal spirits to smallest forms reduced their shapes immense, and were at large, though without number, still amidst the hall of that infernal court. But far within, and in their own dimensions like themselves, the great seraphic lords and cherubim, in close recess and secret conclave, sat 1,000 demigods on golden seats frequent and full. After short silence then, and summons read, the great consult began. End of Book 1, Part 2.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Kirsten Ferreri. Paradise Lost by John Milton. Book 2, Part 1. High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormus and of Ind, or where the gorgeous East with richest hand showers on her kings barbaric pearl and gold, Satan exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, insatiate to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught his proud imaginations thus displayed. Powers and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigor, though oppressed and fallen, I give not heaven for loss. From this descent celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate, me though just right. And the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader, next free choice, with what besides in council or in fight hath been achieved of merit. Yet this loss, thus far at least recovered, hath much more established in a safe unenvied throne yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain? Where there is then no good from which to strive, no strife can grow up there from faction. For none sure will claim in hell precedence, none whose portion is so small of present pain, that with ambitious mind would covet more. With this advantage then to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than prosperity could have assured us. And by what best way, whether of open war or covert guile, we now debate. Who can advise may speak. He ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptred king, stood up, the strongest and the fiercest spirit that fought in heaven. Now fiercer by despair, his trust was with the eternal to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than be less, cared not to be at all. With that care lost went all his fear, of God or hell or worse he recked not, and these words thereafter spake. My sentence is for open war. Of wiles more unexpert I boast not. Them let those contrive who need, or when they need, not now. For while they sit contriving, shall the rest, millions that stand in arms, and longing wait the signal to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's fugitives, and for their dwelling place accept this dark opprobrious den of shame, the prison of his tyranny who reigns by our delay. No, let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury, all at once o'er heaven's high towers to force resistless way, turning our tortures into horrid arms against the torturer, when to meet the noise of his almighty engine he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lightning see black fire, and horror shot with equal rage among his angels, and his throne itself mixed with Tartarian sulphur and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult and steep to scale with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink them, if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake benumb not still, that in our proper motion we ascend up to our native seat. Descent and fall to us is adverse. Who but felt of late when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear, insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk thus low? The ascent is easy then. The event is feared. Should we again provoke our stronger, some worse way his wrath may find to our destruction. If there be in hell fear to be worse destroyed, what can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour calls us to penance? More destroyed than thus we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire, which to the height enraged will either quite consume us, and reduce to nothing this essential, happier far than miserable to have eternal being? Or, if our substance be indeed divine, and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side nothing, and by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge, and battle dangerous to less than gods. On the other side rose Belly, in act more graceful and humane. A fairer person lost not heaven. He seemed for dignity composed, and high exploit, but all was false and hollow. Though his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worse appear the better reason, to perplex and dash maturest counsels, for his thoughts were low, to vice industrious, but to nobler deeds timorous and slothful. Yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began. I should be much for open war or peers, as not behind in hate, if what was urged main reason to persuade immediate war did not dissuade me most, and seemed to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success, when he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels, and what excels mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, as the scope of all his aim after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with armed watch, that render all access impregnable. Oft on the bordering deep encamp their legions, or with obscure wings scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and at our heels all hell should rise with blackest insurrection, to confound heaven's purest light, yet our great enemy all incorruptible would on his throne sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mould, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief, and purge off the baser fire victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must exasperate the almighty victor to spend all his rage, and that must end us. That must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure. For who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity, to perish, rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion? And who knows? Let this be good, whether our angry foe can give it, or will ever. How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he, so wise, let loose at once his ire, belike through impotence, or unaware to give his enemies their wish, and end them in his anger, whom his anger saves to punish endless? Wherefore cease we then? Say they who counsel war, we are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe. Whatever doing, what can we suffer more? What can suffer worse? Is this then worse? Thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? What when we fled amain, pursued, and strook with heaven's afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us? This hell then seemed a refuge from those woes, or when we lay chained on the burning lake? That sure was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires awaked, should blow them into sevenfold rage and plunge us into flames, or from above should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened, and this firmament of hell should spout her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors, threatening hideous fall one day upon our heads, while we, perhaps, designing or exhorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, shall be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under yon boiling ocean wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprieved, ages of hopeless end. This would be worse. War, therefore, open or concealed, alike my voice dissuades. For what can force or guile with him? Or who deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one view? He, from heaven's height, all these our motions vain, sees and derides. Not more almighty to resist our might, than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile, the race of heaven thus trampled, thus expelled to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse by my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us, and omnipotent decree the victor's will. To suffer as to do our strength is equal, nor the law unjust that so ordains. This was at first resolved, if we were wise against so great a foe contending, and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh when those who at the spear are bold and venturous, if that fail them, shrink and fear what they yet know must follow, to endure exile, or ignominy, or bonds, or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which, if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may remit his anger, and perhaps thus far removed not mind us not offending, satisfied with what is punished, whence these raging fires will slacken, if his breath stir not their flames. Our purer essence then will overcome their noxious vapour, or inured not feel, or changed at length, and to the place conformed in temper and in nature will receive familiar the fierce heat, and void of pain. This horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring? What chance, what change worth waiting? Since our present lot appears for happy though but ill, for ill not worst, if we procure not to ourselves more woe. Thus Belial, with words cloaked in reason's garb, counselled ignoble ease, and peaceful sloth, not peace. And after him thus Mammon spoke. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven we war, if war is best, or to regain our own right lost. Him to unthrone we then may hope, when everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance, and chaos judge the strife. The former vain to hope argues as vain the latter, for what place can be for us within heaven's bound, unless heaven's Lord supreme we overpower? Suppose he should relent and publish grace to all, on promise made of new subjection. With what eyes could we stand in his presence humble, and receive strict laws imposed, to celebrate his throne with warbled hymns, and to his Godhead sing forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits, our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odours and ambrosial flowers, our servile offerings? This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity spent so in worship paid to whom we hate! Let us not then pursue by force impossible, by leave obtained unacceptable, though in heaven, our state of splendid vassalage, but rather seek our own good from ourselves, and from our own live to ourselves, though in this vast recess, free and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear then most conspicuous, when great things of small, useful of hurtful, prosperous of adverse, we can create, and in what place soe'er thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain through labour and endurance. This deep world of darkness do we dread. How oft, amidst thick clouds and dark, doth heaven's all-ruling Sire choose to reside, his glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round covers his throne. From whence deep thunders roar mustering their rage, and heaven resembles hell. As he our darkness, cannot we his light imitate when we please? This desert soil wants not her hidden lustre, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art from whence to raise magnificence. And what can heaven show more? Our torments also may, in length of time, become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels, and the settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils, with regard of what we are and where, dismissing quite all thoughts of war. Ye have what I advise. He had scarce finished, when such murmur filled the assembly, as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with hoarse cadence lull seafaring men o'erwatched, whose bark, by chance, or pinnace anchors in a craggy bay after the tempest. Such applause was heard as Mammon ended, and his sentence pleased, advising peace. For such another field they dreaded worse than hell. So much the fear of thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this nether empire, which might raise by policy and long process of time in emulation opposite to heaven. Which, when Beelzebub perceived, than whom Satan except none higher sat, with grave aspect he rose, and in his rising seemed a pillar of state. Deep on his front engraven deliberation sat, and public care, and princely counsel in his face yet shone, majestic though in ruin. Sage he stood, with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention still, as night or summer's noontide air, while thus he spake. Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, or these titles now must we renounce, and changing still be called princes of hell. For so the popular vote inclines here to continue, and build up here a growing empire. Doubtless, while we dream, and know not that the King of heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat beyond his potent arm, to live exempt from heaven's high jurisdiction, in new league banded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed under the inevitable curb, reserved his captive multitude. For he, be sure, in height or depth, still first and last will reign sole king, and of his kingdom lose no part by our revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with iron sceptre rule us here, as with his golden those in heaven. What sit we then projecting peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss irreparable. Terms of peace yet none vouchsafed or sought. For what peace will be given to us enslaved, but custody severe, and stripes, and arbitrary punishment inflicted? And what peace can we return, but to our power hostility and hate, untamed reluctance, and revenge though slow, yet ever plotting how the conqueror least may reap his conquest, and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel? Nor will occasion want, nor shall we need with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? There is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven err not, another world, the happy seat of some new race, called man, about this time to be created like to us, though less in power and excellence, but favoured more of him who rules above. So was his will pronounced among the gods, and by an oath that shook heaven's whole circumference, confirmed. Thither let us bend all our thoughts to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mould or substance, how endued, and what their power, and where their weakness, how attempted best by force or subtlety, though heaven be shut, and heaven's high arbitrators it secure in his own strength. This place may lie exposed to the utmost border of his kingdom, left to their defence who can hold it. Here perhaps some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hellfire to waste his whole creation, or possess as all our own, and drive as we were driven, the puny habitants, or if not drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, and with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy in our confusion, and our joy upraise in his disturbance, when his darling sons, hurled headlong to partake with us, shall curse their frail originals, and fated bliss, fated so soon. Advise if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here hatching vain empires. Thus Beelzebub pleaded his devilish counsel, first devised by Satan, and in part proposed, For whence but from the author of all ill could spring so deep a malice, to confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell to mingle and involve, done all to spite the great Creator? But their spite still serves his glory to augment. The bold design pleased highly those infernal states, and joy sparkled in all their eyes. With full assent they vote, whereat his speech he thus renews. Well have you judged, and well ended long debate, synod of gods, and like to what you are, great things resolved, which from the lowest deep will once more lift us up in spite of fate, nearer our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright confines whence with neighbouring arms and opportune excursion we may chance re-enter heaven, or else in some mild zone dwell not unvisited of heaven's fair light secure, and at the brightening orient beam purge off this gloom. The soft delicious air, to heal the scar of these corrosive fires, shall breathe her balm. But first, whom shall we send in search of this new world? Whom shall we find sufficient? Who shall tempt with wandering feet the dark, unbottomed, infinite abyss, and through the palpable obscure find out his uncouth way, or spread his airy flight upborne with indefatigable wings over the vast abrupt, ere he arrive the happy isle? What strength, what art can then suffice, or what evasion bear him safe through the strict sentries and stations thick of angels watching round? Here he had need all circumspection, and we now no less choice in our suffrage, for on whom we send the weight of all and our last hope relies. This said, he sat, and expectation held his look suspense, awaiting who appeared to second or oppose, or undertake the perilous attempt. But all sat mute, pondering the danger with deep thoughts, and each in other's countenance read his own dismay astonished. None among the choice and prime of those heaven-warring champions could be found so hardy as to proffer or accept alone the dreadful voyage, till at last Satan, whom now transcendent glory raised above his fellows, with monarchal pride conscious of highest worth, unmoved, thus spake. O progeny of heaven, imperial thrones, with reason have silence and demur seized us, though undismayed. Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads up to light. Our prison strong, this huge convex of fire, outrageous to devour, immures us round ninefold, and gates of burning adamant barred over us prohibit all egress. These past, if any pass, the void profound of unessential night receives him next wide gaping, and with utter loss of being threatens him, plunged in that abortive gulf. If thence he scape into whatever world of unknown region, what remains him less than unknown dangers and as hard escape? But I should ill become this throne, O peers, and this imperial sovereignty, adorned with splendor, armed with power, if aught proposed and judged of public moment, in the shape of difficulty or danger, could deter me from attempting. Wherefore do I assume these royalties, and not refuse to reign, refusing to accept as great a share of hazard as of honour, due alike to him who reigns, and so much to him due of hazard more, as he above the rest high honoured sits. Go therefore, mighty powers, terror of heaven, though fallen, intend at home while here shall be our home, what best may ease the present misery, and render hell more tolerable. If there be cure or charm to respite or deceive, or slack the pain of this ill mansion, intermit no watch against a wakeful foe, while I, abroad, through all the coasts of dark destruction seek deliverance for us all. This enterprise none shall partake with me. Thus saying, the monarch, and prevented all reply, prudent, lest from his resolution raised others among the chief might offer now, certain to be refused what erst they feared, and so refused, might in opinion stand his rivals, winning cheap the high repute which he through hazard huge must earn. But they dreaded not more the adventure than his voice forbidding, and at once with him they rose. Their rising all at once was as the sound of thunder heard remote. Towards him they bend with awful reverence prone, and as a god extol him equal to the highest in heaven. Nor failed they to express how much they praised, that for the general safety he despised his own. For neither do the spirits damned lose all their virtue, lest bad men should boast their specious deeds on earth, which glory excites, or close ambition varnished o'er with zeal. Thus they, their doubtful consultations dark, ended rejoicing in their matchless chief, as when from mountain tops the dusky clouds ascending, while the north wind sleeps, o'erspread heaven's cheerful face, the lowering element scowls o'er the darkened landscape's snow or shower. If chance the radiant sun with farewell sweet extend his evening beam, the fields revive, the birds their notes renew, and bleating herds attest their joy that hill and valley rings. O shame to men! Devil with devil damned firm concord holds. Men only disagree of creatures rational, though under hope of heavenly grace, and God, proclaiming peace, yet live in hatred, enmity, and strife among themselves, and levy cruel wars, wasting the earth each other to destroy, as if, which might induce us to accord, men had not hellish foes enow besides, that day and night for his destruction wait. End of Book 2, Part 1.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.